Hello, everyone. We are going to let the room fill up for the journalist roundtable. I'm going to say hello to Blair and Christine and Len and Pat and Sylvia. Thank you so much for joining us. It's good to see you in here again. Cam, Christine, I'm seeing some people who have been in lots of the sessions today. Paige, Randy, Sean. I hope that you all have gotten a couple of minutes to get up and walk around in between the sessions. It takes just a minute for the Zoom room to fill up before we get started. So John Del Vecchio, welcome. Barbie, welcome back. It's good to see you in here again. And I believe we are slowing down. It looks like that doorway has opened up just a little bit. I am going to go ahead and, yep, I think we're good. So again, welcome to the Moto Journalist Roundtable discussion. Our moderator today is David Hilgendorf. He is the former editor of Motorcycle Consumer News, and he is going to lead the discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to let him have the floor. Thank you all so very much for being here. David, thank you.
And welcome, everyone. We have a wonderful panel of journalists on hand here today who are going to talk about the current state of motorcycle journalism, or as we call it, moto journalism. So if you haven't read a motorcycle magazine, you don't have very many choices left. And we're going to find out today maybe why that is. And we're also going to find out if this job is just about riding motorcycles for fun, or what we actually do to earn our paychecks. The staff we have on hand today, I've got Julia LaPalme. She's a professional photographer and journalist, has contributed to many publications, including Motor Trend and Motorcyclist and Cycle World. So if you read those two big ones, you've probably seen her work. We also have Steve Lida. He started in the automotive world, is super knowledgeable about parts manufacturing and auto racing, and then became a moto journalist and is the current editor of American Iron magazine. And is in production on several different magazines as well. We also have on hand Lisa Clickinger, who you may have seen her name bouncing around today, as she is responsible for these Rev Talks and this Rev Conference. She's also an author, a columnist, and a leading motorcycle community and events developer. So if you've traveled the world by motorcycle, you've probably crossed paths with her at some point in time, and she'll be on this as well. She was also one of my contributors as I edited Motorcycle Consumer News for the last several years. So everyone say hi to our moto journalists. If you have questions, there's a little box for you to submit Q&A questions. Please feel free to ask. And if you want them answered by a specific person, please specify which journalist you are asking the question of, because we can't hear your voice, we can only see your words. And what we're going to start with here today is I have questions for each of these journalists, and some of these questions are going to be the same. So I'll probably just go around robin and ask everybody the same ones. And then I've got a couple specific questions for each of these journalists to kind of give them an opportunity to kind of share their experience, because we're all kind of come from different backgrounds. So I'm going to start off with this leading question. I'm going to ask all of our panelists, what does the term motorcyclist mean to you? Let's start with Elisa.
First, I want to explain to everyone that Tricia was unable to be on our panel today, so that's why I'm filling in. And I have been a freelance journalist in the industry, and a motorcyclist means to me somebody who rides two wheels, any three wheels. I mean, I'm seeing so much inclusion with the three-wheel market these days. So I don't know, I guess I'm expanding it to riders. I see the whole big definition.
Okay, how about you, Julia? What is a motorcyclist?
Yeah, it's not much different from what Elise just said, you know, somebody who enjoys riding two and three wheels, getting out on the weekends, putting on long miles for long trips, people who are enthusiasts about motorcycles, love to go to the shows. And I mean, there's so many different ways to enjoy motorcycles in general, but yeah, generally those who ride.
Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, for me, when I hear that word, I dig deeper, I look deeper, and I do, Julia tapped into the enthusiast. Years ago, there were a bunch of people who were weekend warriors. They bought a bike because they saw it on TV. They bought a bike because it was the cool thing that somebody had one down the street or something. So really, a motorcyclist, a true motorcyclist, has it in their blood. I mean, this is a question we often get, we get as Motorcycle Safety Foundation instructors. The MSF asks us, what do you consider a motorcyclist? And to me, it's somebody who's really kind of he wants to go deeper than I just have it. It's a decoration in the garage. I only ride it once in a while. Somebody who doesn't really seek the knowledge, who doesn't seek the extra training, who doesn't dig deeper, the magazines, the books, the videos. To somebody who comes on here to watch this is more than your average weekend warrior kind of person. So motorcyclist, to me, since you're asking a very direct personal question, it's somebody who's a little more than just an avid fan. I mean, they're really, really ingrained in it. They can tell the difference in the models. They have the training or they seek more training. They can talk the talk. They go on the trips. They buy the gear. They do it right. Again, not trying to segregate out anybody. We want to welcome everybody to gain more knowledge and become deeper into motorcycling. But that term, that one word you're using, if I have to define it, I would say that's somebody who's already graduated into really, really digging this, really being a part of it, and really, wrapping their arms around it.
So really being part of your lifestyle makes you a motorcyclist.
Pardon me?
We had a challenge defining, as journalists, like, who do we cater to? Like, is it just two wheels? Does it include automatic scooters? Does it include three-wheeled vehicles like trikes and, Can-Ams and Spiders, things like that? What is, a motorcyclist? Is somebody who rides a quad a motorcyclist? Is that a different sport, or is it not? And I think one of the things Steve said is that, there's so few motorcyclists are such a small part of the demographic, just as motor sport enthusiasts, that to exclude anyone is kind of self-defeating. So to me, I'm a fourth generation motorcyclist. My father, great-grandfather, grandfather, all were motorcyclists. And I've got pictures, dating back 100 years of people in my family riding motorcycles. And so it's, it is in my blood and I feel it. And, but at the same time, I don't want to exclude that person who can't identify. They look at your Honda Goldwing and go, what kind of Harley is that? It's curiosity, and that means that they're interested, and we need to draw those people into the fold, I think. So, it's good to be curious enough to know that there are, different brands, different styles of riding, and different types of motorcyclists. So let's move on to the next question. How did we all break into this moto journalism thing, Elisa?
Well, Steve Lita gave me my first opportunity. I wrote a sidebar for a Lee Parks workshop.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Long
and,
ago.
It was a long time ago. It's a long time ago. Yeah, so that's how I got into it. I had quit the corporate world and actually walked the Community Santiago across Spain. And on it, I met a moto journalist, and I was like, "What? That's a thing? Wait, wow! I can write articles and ride motorcycles and get paid for it." What I didn't understand at the time was that the European market was very different. He was getting 2,500 euro per article, and the American market is way different than that. So. So that was a little bit of an eye opener when I wrote my first article, but I was very appreciative of the opportunity with Steve, and that's how.
Excellent. Julia.
I kind of came to motorcycle journalism by way of photography first. I joined the staff of Motor Trend magazine on the car world, which Steve, you can relate to that. So I started in the car world first, and Motor Trend and Motorcyclist were under the same umbrella at the same time. They were owned by the same company. And so the minute I started at Motor Trend magazine, I bumped my way up to the 17th floor and introduced myself to everybody at all the motorcycle magazines, and including Mitch Beam, who was editor at the time at Motorcyclist, and kept popping my head in and, you know, introduced myself to Kento and all the guys at, you know, Sport Writer and all the other mags. And so I started contributing with those guys a little bit here and there on the photography side. And then years later, when Mark Cook took over as editor, he gave me the opportunity to join Motorcyclist on staff as a writer, which was a really amazing opportunity. So that was kind of my big break.
And Steve, your story's interesting as well.
Not as interesting as that. 17 floors. Wow. I mean, that's a pretty big
17 of
publishing
19.
company. But for me, well, it started at a young age with photography as well. I had actually, you know, contributed some photo essays to some various car magazines, motorcycle magazines, et cetera, while doing other racing and automotive work, things of that nature. I had the opportunity to do some technical work for the now defunct Road Bike magazine, which was published by our publishing company. And that was a foot in the door to meet the people. And they asked me for more, you know, to contribute more stories and more technical editing, things of that nature. And what started out as I had a day job, was doing this part-time. It transitioned to, you know, full-time, and more time with the magazine than less time with the other job. And then they came to me and pretty much said, okay, you need to decide, is it that one or is it this one? And it was a hard decision to make. You know, I had firmly established myself in the other business, but this was kind of a dream. It was kind of once you get a taste of it, you definitely want more. And it was a lot of fun and a lot of work, and learned the right way. I learned it from the bottom all the way up. And so my entry was part-time. A contributor, and then came on staff, and then was lucky enough to work my way up the ladder.
Well, myself, I came into this kind of accidentally by happenstance, but it took about 15 years. So I was working in .com Bay Area, Silicon Valley, when the first crash happened, and I kind of had I would call it whatever, a quarter life crisis, where I was like, do I really want to be doing this? And started pursuing passions as possible career opportunities, and found myself reading an article in this weird black and white rag called Motorcycle Consumer News about motorcycle training, which I had never had, and I'd been riding since I was 6 years old. And so I was like, well, that sounds interesting. Maybe I can teach other people how to ride. So I became a motorcycle safety coach, did the MSF thing for, well, I don't know, 13 years. And, I parlayed that into a job with Scorpion helmets, and then I did a couple of things for Bonnier. And I had the fortune at that point to have moved to Southern Orange County, which is kind of the central location of all the journalist publications. And so I did some work with Dave Searle when he was the editor of MCN. I did some photo shoots and some various bike tests, and I did a marketing tour for Aprilia. And I kept talking with Dave about jobs, hey, what kind of gigs you got? What can I do? What can you do? And then one day he sits me down and he goes, yeah, I'm retiring. And so I just called up the publisher of MCN and said, hey, I hear the editor's retiring. Can I help with anything? And they're like, yeah, you want to test some bikes? And after about 4 months of testing bikes, they said, do you want to be the editor? And so here I was, being the editor of a magazine, completely unintentional. So the fortunate part is that my first job was to hire a managing editor, and I picked a journalist. So I had somebody who actually knew what they were doing. But we worked in a kind of like Julia, we were on a 15th floor, suite with 40 other magazines, 150 employees. So, I had all the support I needed to make it happen. They just needed somebody who knew motorcycles, and that was where I fit in. So I fit in. They shoehorned me in, and I made it work, and I kind of learned trial by fire, and it is a whole lot of hard work, and it's not just riding motorcycles for fun. So, but the fun parts are fun parts. And so the next question that's going to lead me right into, what's your most memorable moto journalism project that you've done as a motorcycle journalist, Elisa?
Project.
Most memorable.
take, it's all the trips I got to take. I mean, it took me a lot of years, but ultimately, you know, being able to ride in foreign destinations and write about them for magazines. And my most memorable is my most recent and unpublished because I wrote in Morocco for a magazine, for an article in MCN, your magazine. And then before it got published, the magazine went out of business. So that's probably my most memorable one.
I want to read that story. How about you, Julia? What was your most memorable?
Oh, goodness. It's a toss-up between riding the FTR 1200 in Baja on street tires, but on a dirt road. That was fun. And between that and the photo shoot for a BMW R1250 GS story for Cycle World, which we spent like 3 days up in, oh gosh, I'm totally blanking out on the name of the park that's, you know, where the Super Bloom happens up in Central Valley, or up in the Central California region.
Joshua Tree?
Yeah. It was beautiful. So we had a lot of really, we had a lot of fun with that. Again, riding a bike on street tires in the dirt. You know, bad decisions make for good stories, right? So.
And so, Steve, your most memorable moto journalism project that you've worked on?
That's a tough one. I've been doing this like 16 years now. Two things come to mind as far as a project goes. The planning and the execution of my first Iron Butt story, which Trisha Zaleski joined me on. First of all, the project was wrangling her into coming with me. Second of all, we did it. Ironically, I was looking it up recently because in July is National Buffalo Day. So that was the theme of our Iron Butt ride. We rode to Buffalo, New York. We rode down to Ohio. We did Quicker Steak and Lube. We did this big loop, 1,000 miles. 23 hours later, we're crawling home and couldn't find anybody to sign our Iron Butt certificate at the gas station because the attendant thought we were crazy. So we waited, and a dude pulled up on a bike at 4 a.m. because he was going to Brooklyn. He worked at a bakery, and we're thinking, okay, well, that makes sense. And he said, "Oh, you're doing that? Yeah, sure, I'll sign that for you." So the project was the execution and the planning and the meticulous details, and then it all falls apart halfway through, and I ran out of gas, and Trish had to save the day, and this dude came and saved the day by signing our certificates and stuff. So by you using that word project, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Believe it or not, there was a lot of planning involved, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a great story, and I still reference that story. And I was looking at the calendar today. The summer solstice is coming up, the longest day of the year. Hey, that's a great day to do an Iron Butt, right? So I'm planning that. I'm thinking about that. So as far as projects go, as far as like epic projects go, my very first press launch was in South Africa for a week long on a Triumph Sprint GT, and I tell you what, that for a project, that was a pretty epic deal too. That was back in 2005 or 6 or something. And but yeah, no, it's ironic when you use that word. I keep thinking about the Iron Butt Rally story. That was a lot of fun.
I think, yeah, when you think about moto journalism, it looks like a bunch of pretty pictures and beautiful locations, and it is, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it. And so when we say project, you know, all of us can attest to how much planning and organization and, you know, things have to work. And when they don't, it's an adventure. You got to figure it out as you go. Things don't always work. So you know, I think I loved the product launches were always a blast. You know, some of the manufacturers really go all out to make sure that we, you know, get the best experience on the motorcycles. And, you know, I can't argue with that, but from a project standpoint, I think the thing I was most proud of was, you know, revamping MCN and kind of just really kind of modernizing it and making it more colorful and more, you know, just easier to read, because it had kind of got stuck in a rut for a long time. So we spent a long time just kind of rebooting the whole thing, and I think it came out really good. And I was super proud of the work that the team did to just kind of make it look better. And you know, that really pays off when you hear that from the consumer, and you start getting, you know, the emails go from, "Oh my God, you're ruining my great magazine," to, "Oh, thanks so much for making it look better." You know, it's kind of heartwarming. So there's always a, you know, a nice silver pot gold pot of gold at the end of the rainbow when you when you finish a project that you get recognized for, that people appreciated. So, so the next question I have that's going to go around Robin here is, there's all this magazines failing left and right, a lot of content's going online. Some of that content comes from sources that may or may not be credible. So how do we, as consumers, and especially motorcycle consumers, how do we identify which content is trustworthy out there in the marketplace? And I'll start with Steve on this one, because I think he's going to have some good opinions.
That's a really good question. How does the consumer determine? And I'm a consumer too. And I take everything I see or read, with a grain of salt. You can't believe it all. There is, I hate to use this term, there is a lot of fake news out there. From now, put my editor hat on, as far as presenting material, whether it be on our online channels or in print. Yes, a lot of effort goes into those. You should see what hits the cutting room floor. I mean, you should see what doesn't make it. I go round and round and round with people who pitch stories to me, and I have to vet the person. I have to vet the story. I have to really, dig deeper and see if one, what they're saying is legit. Two, if it hasn't been plagiarized. Three, if it's worth, presenting to my readers. Are they going to appreciate it? Does it mean something to them? That there's two ways to look at that. And what's, how do you determine what's good or bad? For me, it's been 16 years of figuring it out. And again, knowing the market, watching the market, staying on top of current news, the latest news, having the connections in the industry to be able to double check and fact check, stories, so being kind of an insider, that's good that I had that. And again, that I hope that helps my readers by me trimming the fat first before it goes out. But as far as, the way you presented the question was, how does a consumer tell? Yeah, good luck. I mean, there's been some stuff I've read that I said, no way, that's not happening. That ain't gonna happen. That's not gonna happen. That didn't happen, or what have you. So it's kind of a common sense thing, and it's kind of a, buyer beware. Be careful what you're buying, for information.
And Julia, what's your take on that? What is trustworthy content to you? How do you identify that from the garbage, the fake news?
I think it depends on if we're talking about fact-based stories versus opinion-based stories. A lot of the bike reviews are subjective. Subjective to a certain point, but I think for me particularly, it's valuable to get input on how a bike feels when somebody's riding it, if I know that they're about the same size as me. And sometimes gender even plays a role with that. Not too often, but sometimes it does. Because I know that I've come back from motorcycle trips and had feedback about bikes that guys thought I was crazy. And, we're a different weight, we're a different size. So, that suspension is going to respond differently to me. I'm going to not be able to reach the ground as easy as they can. So the seat height is going to be more comfortable for me, etc. So I think from a consumer standpoint, you want to find somebody that you feel kind of aligns with your body type and your riding style, and try to find multiple journalists that kind of fit that mold so that you can relate to them on a personal level, so that their opinions of motorcycles are more valuable to you. But from a fact-based standpoint, you've got to look at the guys that have been in the industry for a long time, the folks that are spending many years, either avid sports fanatics, so they're watching all the races, so they know all the facts. The folks that have been in this industry for years and years, and they've ridden multiple motorcycles, and they've got their finger on the pulse of what the industry is doing, so they can talk about the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. There's a couple different ways to look at it. So, but you definitely have to be a discerning reader. Or viewer in some cases. So
great. Well, Elisa, what are your thoughts on that?
Tricia and I were talking about this before the panel when we were doing our tech test, and we shared the same opinion that if consumers look to resources that have a paid staff and a paid, they're putting money into the infrastructure. I think that you have a better chance of getting real and true information, especially since maybe you have journalists that you follow that that you have trusted their opinion over a long period of time, or they have them to have high journalistic standards. I think it's very different to get information from a magazine that's published or online, like WRN, or in print, like, well, Motorcyclist is not print anymore, but American Iron. When you have paid professionals executing those stories, I think that there's a better chance. There's so much, I think, misinformation on Facebook, and I used to spend a lot of time on an adventure forum, and that's really that spectrum is all over the place of stuff that's real, and there's a lot of hearsay on there. So I think that the professional publications are a better source for consumers. What I loved about working for MCN was that we were supported by subscriptions, not by advertising. And I know as a freelancer that I have been told, okay, well, you got to write something about these guys because they're advertising with us this month. I'm like, oh, really? And I hope they're not listening, because I still like to get work in the industry, and I toe the line when I have to. But that's been it was a real joy to work at MCN, because I could say what I wanted to, and I want to be clear, I wasn't so much writing fact-based stories myself. I was writing a lot of travel stories and opinion myself. So if you liked my opinion, great. But yeah, back to the published magazines, I think that you have a better chance of getting better information from them. Unfortunately, they're a dying breed.
Yeah, and going back into segueing into a dying magazine, a couple of us here have worked for dead magazines now, and it's a challenge. And MCN had the advantage of being subscriber based in the fact that we didn't cater to ads, and as an editor, I had to watch for product placements in submissions, because a lot of writers write to that style, and you have to really cater to your audience, and so I had to kind of coach certain writers to keep their whatever they were pushing, whether it was a certain travel boutique outfit, or whether it was a certain style or brand of bike, or whether it was a certain hotel on the trip that they went to. That really had no place in our magazine, and that may be fine for other titles that they write for. But it is definitely, I think, even and Steve brought this up, that there is some editorial ethics around how advertising works, and the ads themselves, as this is Steve's words, ads don't buy the editorial, but without the ads, there is no editorial. So. Yeah, go ahead and elaborate on that, Steve. You have any more feedback on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are a commercial publication. We're privately owned. We're owned by a publishing company. So there are bills to pay. There are a lot of bills to pay. I loved MCN, and I loved it for that reason. I know you and Dave before you did a great job of making sure that everything was even keel, and everything was on the up and up, and no, we're not supported by ads, and it was very evident. And with us, we do have that cliche, we have that watchword, ads don't buy editorial. We do have supporters, we do have marketing people, or companies that we help them with their marketing. You could say they place an ad, they offer us a product. We have to be very, very plain and upfront. Pick on the flaws, pick out the good points and pick out the flaws. I don't want anything when I'm planning the magazine, and we don't want anything to be blatant, like an advertisement on one page and then review of that product on the next page. You know, I mean, that, come on, who bought that? You know, I mean, yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. It's a necessary thing that we have in the industry for commercial titles like mine. You know, we need those ad dollars to pay for the pages, and that determines how many pages we have to play with. That which determines how many great scenic epic photos we can run, and how many stories we can jam in there, and then how many reviews we can bring, and how many products we can show. So there is a commercial you know, validation to have a product in the magazine be, you know, reviewed, tested, shown in use, or shown being installed on a bike or what have you. And that's what those companies, those commercial companies are looking for. So it is kind of a hand-in-hand thing. You know, we help them, they help us. You know, there have been times when we've had problems with a product, and, you know, we go to the company and we say, hey, look, do you want us to run this? I mean, you know, we have to be upfront with the readers. The readers are the ultimate customer. You know, so you know, we can't sugarcoat something to, you know, just because the guy bought an ad. You know, there have been times we got defective products. We got to give them an opportunity to give us a good one. You know, a replacement item, or something that wasn't under warranty or what have you. So, I mean, there's many different cases, but overall, yeah, I mean, it's more than a cliche with us that, you know, ads don't buy editorial. You know, but again, we have to bear in mind that we do have a commitment to our marketing partners to help them promote their products, to get them in front of the readers. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell their widget, their gadget, their part, their trip, their tour company, or you know, what it may be. So yeah, there's an ethical line to walk there, and you know, we try to be, you know, upfront and up about it. It's a necessary item. I'm not even going to call it a necessary evil, because it's not. It's business. That's the way it works on television. That's the way it works on radio. That's the way it works on Facebook. I loved it when that congressman was interrogating Mark Zuckerman and couldn't figure out how he made money. Zuckerman sat there and said, we sell ads. That's what we do, folks. This is not about bringing people together. It's about selling ads. So, I mean, it's, you know, even in social media, it's presented itself. You know, these companies use social media to sell their product, you know. So it's in what we enjoy. Motorcycling is our love. It's our passion. You know, it's what we're dedicated to. Believe it or not, there's all these commercial entities surrounding that who help us do these things with bikes, actually the bikes themselves, and the trips and the tours and the parts and the gear. So they need a way to reach the consumer. That's what, you know, we're here for, as well as presenting the dream, presenting that dream lifestyle, what everybody wants to do. So it's a necessary.
And you know, people think MCN didn't struggle with those same issues. We actually did, just in a different way. So with an ad-based revenue, you have to cater your content to your advertiser to some extent, because if you make them angry, they stop paying the bills. And we have the same problem, because we didn't pay for our motorcycles. We had got them loaned to us by the OEMs, and we were very critical. And if you're very critical about a motorcycle, you'll get a call from the press manager, and they'll be like, hey, what's going on? You know, and you risk not getting loans from them anymore, which is the same as not getting ad dollars for us, right? If we can't borrow the bike, I mean, they're really shooting themselves in the foot, because any press is good press, and they're better to have it in our magazine than not. But you know, there have been times in the past, not during my watch, because I smoothed over a few opportunities to have lost some of our OEM providers, but when they didn't like our reviews, I said, well, you know, just look at it from our side. You know, we may not have thought your bike was as good as you think it is, but we gave you the cover, you know, and you didn't pay for that. That was free. You know, you got on the cover of my magazine, it's out there, and there was no money exchanged for that. And so, you know, yeah, we didn't like the bike that much, but you got a lot of good press on that, whether it was, you know, maybe it's not the right bike for us, but we still try to say, hey, you know, this bike might be right for someone else under such and such circumstances, you know? So, yeah, it's tough. And we tried to kind of, you know, barter that critical aspect of when we were saying something bad about it by having multiple riders on the bike, because sometimes just because I don't like it doesn't mean somebody else doesn't like it. You know, we had a guy who was 5'10", a guy who's 6 foot, and a guy who's 6'3". That's three different size people who, you know, when they each get on a bike might find a completely different experience. Like Julia was saying earlier, you got to find somebody who is kind of riding the same ride you're riding, you know, same height, same style, same type of bike. And that makes it a whole lot more valid information than us just saying it's underpowered or that the shocks aren't up to snuff or the fuel economy stinks or whatever it is that, you know, we had a problem with. And, you know, and it's hard, we were going back to editorial ethics, you know, even as an editor or a journalist, fact checking can be really difficult when even the OEMs don't know the own statistics on their products. And you got, you know, Triumph of Europe and Triumph of America telling you two completely different numbers because they didn't do the conversion right from metric to English. It's a hot mess. And so, you know, I can't even tell you how many times we had to print corrections on data that we thought we got right and we didn't, because it happens. And, you know, even as much time as you spend looking and riding that bike, you can still, you know, screw up a piece of information, and it's hard to get it all, especially when you're as data heavy as MCN was, where we're just literally measuring everything, to not mix up a number from one bike to another, or from, you know, between different models that are very similar, things like that. So yeah, it's challenging. And, you know, the industry itself, while they want to help and they want the exposure, at the same time, they're only looking out for their best interests too. So if you're poking them in the side, they get a little annoyed by that, whether that's advertising or that's loaning product or sending you on a product launch or whatever it is that they're up to. So, so anyway, I guess let's segue that into the future. So now we're talking about what, you know, all these magazines are closing and there's all of this content out there that we don't know whether it's trustworthy or not. What is the future of motorcycle journalism? I'm going to start with Julia.
Oh gosh.
No pressure.
Start with the freelancer, man.
You've been at so many different titles. I feel like you have more exposure than we do.
I do. The future looks complicated, to be honest. You know, I feel like there's such a big segue from your traditional publications, which I think the three of us are really, the four of us, I should say, are all very familiar with. But there's so much more attention being put on social media and influencers on social media. And ultimately, you know, the manufacturers, they want to reach a wide audience. And if people aren't picking up printed magazines as much as they are going online, or as, you know, as much time as they're spending on social media, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or what have you, they want to find the channels that are going to reach their audience. So from my experience, it feels like more attention is going towards that avenue. But I haven't been on staff at a magazine, at a publication for 2.5 years now. So, you know, I'd love to know what Steve thinks about that and what you guys think. So, yeah, you know, whether we like it or not, I feel like social media, like I said, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, video is a big element of it too. A lot of people want to have the information somewhat spoon-fed to them, and kind of put into an entertainment value, and being able to watch somebody's experience on video seems to be more entertaining to the current generations that are tuning in. So, yeah.
And all right, well, she called you out, Steve. What are your takes on the future of moto journalism?
Well, not to contradict Julia here, and yeah, it's totally recognizable what has happened and what is happening. And here's the total irony is I love what we're doing here. This is new. This bringing people together. These conferences for Elisa and for Brittany will be going on all day. Different topics, different subjects. I mean, this is great, you know, and people can tune in instead of sitting in front of the television set or, you know, going on Netflix or what have you. This is their passion. They want to do this, and this is kind of a new media. So I'm really, really happy to be on here, and really, really happy to be a part of this and to see this happen. Digital, not print. Now, generally speaking, I certainly hope print isn't dead. I certainly happen to think print is not dead. I still get emails, I still get calls, I still get letters from people who say, yes, I do the online stuff, and yes, I get the quick news, but we want that deeper dive stuff in print. We want beauty. There are people who still save the magazine because they want the whole year collection, and they want to be able to go back and reference something instead of searching for it on their phone. I think there's room for both media, and actually not just both, not two, but three, like this video array type thing. We have a social media channel, we have web presence, we have e-blasts, so we're also deeply involved in that as well. As far as paying the bills, though, we find that print's still king. I mean, we still make a good living printing a print magazine and bringing those longer form stories to the readers. So there is a place for instantaneous feedback, instantaneous news, instantaneous things. I go searching for news really quick. I pick up my phone right away or my iPad, and I'm looking for it. So yeah, there's that. There's also a place for print. There's also a customer for print. There's also a reader. I've read various mainstream media reports about there's actually a movement of a lack of trust of internet, forum boards, social media, things of that nature. Aside from politics and aside from what's going on in the world, generally speaking, some numbers at some social media sites have been dwindling because people are thinking like, oh man, this is toxic, I gotta shut this off for a while or what have you. So through trudging along and continuing to produce our product on time, every time, and in good numbers, we've been able to persevere. We've been able to persevere because some of our competitors went away. It's fine with me. I'm sorry to say, I know a lot of the people that worked at those magazines that went away, and those are compatriots of mine and friends of mine, but it allowed us to survive. So now with the fewer print magazines to read, that maybe gives my print publications, my several titles, a better foothold. So it was kind of, that end of it might have been a survival of the fittest kind of thing. But overall, I still think there's a place for both products, all the products, as far as getting the news out there, getting to the readers, no matter whether they're reading it on a device or reading it in paper. So from that standpoint, and again, I know my demographic, and my demographic, I'll come right out and say it's an older, it's a more mature person that reads our mag, and that's a person who's a little averse to online news, so they want to go to the print. So as far as them dying out, I certainly hope the younger generation to middle generation, as they get older, they will recognize and start to appreciate the print publication, the print product as well. So no, I don't think it's going away, but I do agree with Julia that wow, look what has happened. But we're still here, we're still plugging away, we're still printing, and I think there's room for both.
Yeah, and just to segue, you said there is, the future might be what we're doing here. So since what we're doing here is Elisa's territory, what do you think about the future of photojournalism?
Yeah, I mean, certainly this is a big experiment, right? Trying to move with the times. I mean, I'm a print person. I love magazines. I have stacks of magazines. I really like reading paper. I love paper maps, call me a dinosaur. This idea is born out of some of the topics that we're talking about here. Where can people find reliable information? One of the great privileges of my being inside the motorcycle industry is that I have met so many very interesting people and have had access to so much great information that other people might not have been able to have access to. So delivering it in this manner is, I hope, speaks to the question of, where can we find reliable sources of information. I am thrilled that American Iron is still in print, and as are the other magazines. I think it's a tough thing. Printing costs are just so much. I mean, you can talk to how much. I've never been on staff at a magazine. I've always just contributed articles, so I don't know what those numbers are. But I know it's a tremendous effort. It takes a big staff, and it takes, you know, art directors, and it takes editors, and it takes freelancers, and it takes photographers, and it takes all of that. Plus, you've got the whole print, you know, fulfillment side of it. So, you know, it's a huge amount of money. So you need huge numbers of readers, and if readers aren't supporting it, which is another thing, you know, we'll probably be talking about throughout the conference, is, you know, supporting those things that you love. So if you love American Iron, by all means, get a subscription. Even if you don't read every copy, just it helps support the magazine if you want it to stay around. We need to support.
They read every copy. They read every word. I get letters every day.
Dude, that's awesome. And I heard that from the people I met at MCN too. Yeah,
MCN readers were definitely diehards, and they definitely read cover to cover. And you know, people ask, you know, when a magazine fails, well, why did it fail? You know, Motorcyclist was 100 years old, MCN was 50 years old. I mean, these magazines have been around a long, long time. They failed because people stopped paying for them. And when people stop paying for the magazine, the advertisers stop spending dollars. And when the advertisers stop spending dollars, you can't hire staff. When you can't hire staff, everything is just, it's a downward spiral. And so it's not that we didn't make good content. It's that, you know, there aren't any newsstands anymore. It's not like I can put MCN on a newsstand and hope that we can sell it there. And that's all been gone for years. And you know, we were really slow on the uptake when it came to digital. And that's a systemic problem within our organization. I don't know that carries out through other, I've seen, you know, basically the Bonnier stuff has all gone digital and they've gotten rid of print altogether. But going back to what you said about the cost of printing a magazine, production costs are about a third of it, you know, and printing cost is about a third, print and ship. And then, you know, overhead is another third of it. So if you break it down really easily, you know, you can produce content. It's not cheap, but how do you get it out into the marketplace? How do you find an audience? And on the internet, you get two benefits that you don't get in print. And one is immediacy. So you can print something online and it's up there 5 seconds later. For me to ship you a magazine takes me, you know, 60 days probably. Even today, as efficient as we are, it takes 60 days to get it to your hands. From the time I print it, you're writing me a mail saying, oh, you know, what about this in your last issue? And I'm already 2 issues ahead of you, right? I'm already 60 days ahead of you. So I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that issue. That was a while ago. So yeah, it's so far behind the times. You know, another challenge I see is that, you know, the ease of posting content online. What I was seeing, we were going back to that quality of trustworthy content, is that most of it is regurgitated. It's like somebody takes a press release from such and such company and they just paste it up on their website and they cover it with ads. And then that's how they try to make their money. And you're not generating content, you're just clickbaiting. I mean, that's really all you're doing. And so that's what I'm seeing with the online is clickbaiting. Well, the advertisers love that because now they can measure everybody who clicked on their bait, right? And you can't do that with a magazine. You can't count eyeballs for everybody who read that magazine, for every newsstand it was sitting on, for every doctor's office that somebody picked it up while they were waiting in. You know, for every husband of the wife who has the subscription who picks up the copy next to the bedstand. I mean, there's so many ways that they used to measure, you know, the clicks, as you would call it, the eyeballs per view of a magazine, but it's not as accurate as clicks on an internet. On an internet, you can measure instantly. The advertisers know exactly how much to pay for that, and how much they're willing to pay for that, or how many eyeballs they're getting, or if they're the right eyeball. They know how old that person is. They know how long they've been a motorcyclist. They know what demographic, what state they live in. They know how much they make. All of that data that Google and Facebook and Instagram, all those guys are collecting from the readers, from their viewers, all of that goes back to the advertisers so that they know exactly who they can target. And the advertisers love that. And so, of course, that you're again, back to the downward spiral, right? It's people are writing content for motorcyclists that is geared towards driving clicks. It's not geared towards motorcyclists. It's geared towards selling ad revenue. And so One of the things I said at MCN is like, hey, if we're the last print magazine left, I want to be like Steve Leder. I don't want to be the last print magazine left, because if I am, there is still a market for that, and there is somebody who will buy it. And we were getting pretty close to being one of the last ones left. And, there's only, if you go out and look for a motorcycle magazine now, especially here in the US, there's only a handful. I mean, very, very small number, and they are very niche. We were one of maybe 2 or 3 that were multi-brand. Most of the niche ones are very specifically focused on one style of riding or one brand, one model. And so, yeah, it's just getting hard to find diversified content out there in the marketplace. And it's become, when I look at the future of moto journalism, I sure hope clickbait press releases is not it. I hope there's something more for us out there than that. And I hope that the consumer is willing to back that and pay for that, because there are people out there who are enthusiasts like us and like everybody who's watching this right now who want quality content, but it's not free. You got to pay for it. You're either paying for it with ad clicks or you're paying for it with hard dollars out of your pocket. And how are you going to do that? Go ahead, Steve.
I want to spin this right. I want to spin this right back around to that earlier question about ads versus editorial. Dave, you just went on a tirade about the value of the ads online and what the advertisers are doing with that data, and are they're paying some bills, and so it has permeated from the old-fashioned print world to the new frontier, the new world, and it's a wise old journalist once said, and I'm not going to name his name, but the editorial fills the space between the ads. And I wrote it down somewhere. I quoted him on that date, and that he told me that. It made me sad to hear that, but it's true in my world, true in the new world.
Yeah, and one of the things we were looking to do is we were trying to become more digital, but I think the problem that I know the problems that we had, they were systemic problems in the organization that I was in, where they were not motorcyclists. So I worked for a company that had no motorcyclists on staff and didn't even want to be in the magazine business. So now you're trying to print a motorcycle magazine, and you got a bunch of people who don't want to print magazines and they don't know anything about motorcycles, and you can really see how challenging that is as a career opportunity. That's pretty much a dead end. So yeah, I think for this to be successful, we need to have more enthusiasts really running the show. And that's why the ones who are still around, that's why Bonnier is not printing magazines anymore. There's no enthusiasts behind that. I mean, they hired enthusiasts to run it, but Bonnier is a major international publishing company. They don't care about motorcycles. Steve, you're fortunate to have an owner and a publisher who actually does care about motorcycles and really is invested in the space and really doesn't want to quit and wants to figure out how to make it work. And I can say the same for Alyssa.
We're fortunate. We're fortunate in that he our boss is an enthusiast. He owns bikes. He rides bikes all the time, and that may be a part of why we've survived so long, is that we've got that really ingrained all the way to the top.
Yeah, and I think you need that in this space because the space is so small. There just isn't enough money here for someone to try and make bank as a business. It has to be a passion. It can't just be a business. And that's what I see. You can take that all the way down to the dealership level. Same thing. The successful dealers aren't these car dealers coming in trying to make a buck. It's the guy who lives and breathes motorcycles that is successful as a motorcycle dealer. So yeah, it's really about passion. So let's segue that. Let's get out of this heavy talk and let's talk about some fun stuff. I've got all these good questions for our panel here. We'll start with Julia, because you are an artist. What inspired you to become a photographer?
Oh, a number of things, but I think the biggest inspiration was National Geographic magazine, to be honest. That would probably be my pie in the sky job, to be honest. So I feel like when I started doing automotive photography and then segued to motorcycle photography, I could combine those two passions of being outdoors and being able to travel and just, I've had friends tell me that some of my photos look like beautiful landscape photos. There just happens to be a car in it, or there happens to be a motorcycle in it. So, and I'll take that as a compliment, but yeah, it was National Geographic. Both my father and my stepfather were also hobbyist photographers. And so I saw them working with SLRs when I was a kid. So Yeah.
So you started with photography as a child, but when did motorcycles come into play? Was that before or after you were a photographer?
Yeah, I did. I started photography in high school, and then I picked up motorcycling in college. So, and then I combined the two a number of years later. So,
So one of our viewers, Julia Biggs, asked, "What is your favorite photograph?" I'm going to assume she means what's your favorite of your own photographs, but feel free to say National Geographic.
yeah, I mean, one of the favorites of my own shots, I guess, would be, I think it was the cover for Motorcyclist magazine with that R1250 GS. Adam Wahid was riding that bike, and I made him go through a mud puddle about a dozen times, and the poor guy had street tires on it because certain people hadn't prepped it with the proper tires for us in time, so we were just kind of stuck with what we got. And he was a trooper. He picked that bike up dozens of times throughout the 2 or 3 days that we were up in Carrizo Plain. But he went through that puddle and just sent up a wave of mud, and ended up being the cover of the magazine. And what most people probably don't realize is that he's actually mid-crash, so he got very wet doing that photo. But it was fun, and it's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, we never show the crash photos, rarely in the magazines, but I think we've all fallen down on a bike launch once or twice.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I took a number of photos of him just squatting to pick that bike up because it was happening so often.
Yeah, I love those BMW launches because they're just like, yeah, riding motorcycles is an adventure, and they don't even tell you what you're getting into until you're out there riding through dirt on street tires, and it's
right.
Like, what? They're a little bit hardcore, so it's fun.
Yeah.
Let's see. So let's ask some questions here. Steve, I've got a question for you. Why do certain riders or so many riders associate so strongly with a single brand or style of motorcycles? You've been doing motor journalism for a long time, and you probably have a lot of very hardcore single branders, and it's not just the brand that you cover, but other brands do the same. It's like, why do people get so focused on one style of motorcycling?
Good question. I like to say it's, once you find something you like, to stick with it. However, I've seen a lot of people change camps. I'm fortunate. I've had exposure to lots of different brands. My garage is loaded with American, Japanese, and European bikes. So maybe I'm an enigma that, I dig all of them. And I've met people like that too, who they like the Brit bikes, they like old bikes, they like new bikes, and everything like that. But you're right. I mean, there are some people that are honed in and they only like this one style. Adventure guys, adventure people like adventure bikes. They're the only ones that matter. That's all. Things like that. I've seen a lot of guys get off of Harleys and get on an adventure bike, and they're like, wow, I can sit up straight. This is great. This thing will really lean way over. So. I have seen people, train, and even if you're into an American cruiser, now you have choices in an American cruiser, and there have been people that have jumped camp, to the other brand and so forth. So, to answer your question, I think it's a bit of, my dad had one. My family's always had Chevrolets. I got to get a Chevrolet kind of thing. So there's a little bit of that. You find something you like, you stick with it. But no, I've seen plenty of folks who have dipped their toe into something new, or gone on a test ride, or were enticed to go to Daytona or to Sturgis or something and go on a demo ride for the other brand or the other style of bike, and they come away with it with open eyes, and they're like, wow, I got to get me one of those, or something. They realize their old brand isn't the only game in town, So. Yeah, I mean, Harley riders, Indian riders, they're very focused, very mainstream. They're very, very zoned in and tuned into their brand and so forth. So there's a lot of that pride. They talk the talk so long that this brand rules, that if they were to change brands, they would be going against something they said many years ago. So might be a little bit of that thrown in there too.
Yeah, I think when you flip that to the marketing side, what I see is, Harley's big marketing push now has been to bring new riders in because they already basically dominate the market in the United States. And so their whole marketing scheme was like, well, let's get some new riders because we already have all the riders. And if you look at everybody else's marketing scheme, it's like, how do we get your butt on our bike instead of a Harley? So they're like, butts and seats, butts and seats, butts and seats. That's like their whole marketing plan is how do I get a butt in a seat? Like that's all they care about. So yeah, it's kind of funny when you're the 800-pound gorilla of the market, the industry, where you're targeting like, how do I even get any riders on my bike if I've got them all already? And the other ones are like, well, I want to steal them from my neighbor. My neighbor's got all my customers. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting diversity of riders out there. And you can take that all the way into, I grew up on a farm in the Midwest. I rode dirt bikes when I was a kid, got my first street bike when I was 17, and I went backwards. I got a cruiser before I got a sport bike, and everybody's like, don't you just go have the sport bike when you're a teenager and then get the cruiser when you get old? And I'm like, I don't know. I like going fast now. So, I did it kind of the slow way. I started small and worked my way up to performance rather than starting with something big and heavy and working my way back down. So, yeah, and I find now, as I'm getting older, I'm enjoying going back in the dirt again. I had been off dirt for so many years, and now adventure bikes have become such a big thing. It's like, oh yeah, here's a big, really, really big dirt bike. Is basically what it is, and it's they can be a lot of fun. If you know what you're doing. So, my whole thing is learn, practice and try different bikes. Throw your leg over whatever you can and see what fits. I see, people asking questions in the thing about, how come you don't test bikes that fit, somebody who's 5'2"? There's a couple of reasons for that. And one is the vast majority of people who ride bikes are taller than 5'2", and the vast majority of bikes are taller than 5'2". And there's a good reason for that. The design of a bike limits how low, unless you're, making a gator, for those of the really like recumbent style motorcycles where you sit kind of down in between the wheels. The format of a motorcycle, you're sticking an engine between two wheels. There really isn't much place for a rider to go but up. So, if you get into the cruisers, a lot of shorter riders have to ride cruisers because those really are the lowest bikes on the market. And so if you're catering to a wider demographic of sizes, cruisers make a ton of sense, if you want to be able to put your feet on the ground. That being said, I've seen some pretty short ladies get on a BMW GS that can't even touch.
Say,
yeah,
tell that to Jocelyn Snow.
Jocelyn Snow is amazing.
5 foot even, isn't she? She's 5'0",
Oh my God, yeah.
and she's
Tiny.
riding a 1250 GS. That
Oh, yeah.
that woman is an inspiration.
Yeah, in the sand too, in 6 inches deep, soft sand, and she's out there and all of 5 feet tall and can't even touch ground, and she's out there riding a BMW GS 1250. So yeah, you can do it. You just got to practice. You just got to have trust and faith in yourself and get out there and do it. And
be willing to pick up the bike a lot.
You have to be willing to fall and learn how to fall without the bike landing on top of you. Yeah, and if you're willing to fall over a few times, you'll pick it up, or somebody will help you with the GS. It's an interesting world out there for sure with what's going on with everybody kind of picking and choosing their little kind of segment of the industry and not really kind of going outside of it. And I know my hope is that journalists and hopefully some of these social media folks out there will inspire people to try something new. If you've never been on a sport bike, go do it. If you've never been on a cruiser, go do it. If you've never been on an adventure bike, go do it. Take a dirt bike class, or ride a trike. Have you ever ridden a trike? Oh my God, it's a completely different experience than riding a motorcycle. So, get a chance to go out there and do it. Throw your leg over, just say yes and just go try it, because you might find that, what you've been riding the whole time was not the right thing for you and you needed to try something different instead. So, let's go back here to some more questions, see what we've got here. Some questions for Elisa. So you wrote a book called Boost Your Confidence Through Motorcycling. What inspired you to write that book?
I love evangelizing motorcycling outside the motorcycle industry. I wrote the book in such a way that would support motorcyclists, help them see the possibilities in themselves for themselves, but also hopefully attract more people to the sport. It gives me an opportunity to speak at different places. I'm always poking at where can I evangelize motorcycling. A couple of years ago, I got a speaking spot at the New York Times travel show, So I was there talking about motorcycle travel. Yeah. That's
Just
my short answer.
evangelizing the sport. I like it. So is that also why you created Rev Talks, or is there more behind this, what we're watching right now, than just evangelical motorcycling?
Well, it's certainly, there's many different reasons. Brittany and I found that we just love this type of format and educating people and bringing people together in a different way. And it was certainly a product of the times. You know, I as a freelancer, I don't make a full-time living writing motorcycle articles, so I run tours, I do events, and yeah, nobody's doing any of that right now. So it was a pivot, and I fell in love with it. And so the reasons behind it is, yeah, I saw an opportunity. I love bringing people together. Opportunity to work with Brittany is phenomenal. We're just a phenomenal team. And we're creating something new, and it's very exciting. I've realized through this process that I am a creator. We are creators, and we just love creating stuff. So, you know, and we don't compete with anybody. We just enhance. You know, this whole Rev Talks thing just enhances everything. So I'm hoping, you know, people will find our videos on YouTube and become enchanted with motorcycling. That would be awesome. But the primary purpose is supporting existing riders.
Excellent. So let's go back to the reader, watcher, viewer questions. We've got Cassandra asked us, this is kind of going in reverse a little bit, but in this digital world, everybody is a photographer or a writer automatically because it's easy to push publish and put something out in the world. How do we stay relevant? Steve, how do we stay relevant as journalists when everybody is now a journalist? I'm gonna just put that one out there, whoever wants to answer it.
I mean, I think it really comes down to creating, I mean, especially from a photographer standpoint, it just comes down to creating visually appealing photography. And much as I don't like to admit it, because I'm still paying off student loans, you don't need a degree for that. So, but it, you know, it also, it just takes a lot of practice when it comes to writing, finding mentors to kind of increase the professional feedback that you get to make yourself a better writer. Reading a lot too makes you a better writer. Whether it's reading within the industry that you're writing for or reading outside, just to kind of increase your vocabulary and kind of increase the way that you approach how you tell stories. So, you know, I think making yourself stand out to be a little bit more unique and creative, and people can do that in lots of different ways.
Anyone else want to expound on that?
I'd only suggest for people who want to do this online, or post or start getting involved in moto journalism, and you know, without being in print, without having to use a real DSLR, without writing long form stories. Also, you might want to try to be humble. Sensationalism. It goes here. I'm going to post this because I want to get a lot of clicks, because I want people to look at my stuff. You know, it's like a hunger that feeds itself. That it's like a snowball rolling downhill and gets out of control. But if you're humble and genuine and produce quality, then more people will want to see it. People want to see more of it. So there's a bit of that. You know, the quality both in the images and the quality in the what you're generating for text, what you're generating for emotion. Everything is spell check these days. There's some pretty weak, text out there floating around online. But if you don't sensationalize and don't get on the bandwagon of I'm just going to post this, to see what happens. Well, no, I mean, do something that's worth it. Be humble. Take pride in the product. Take pride in your craft. Turn it into a craft.
Yeah, I found, Steve, you said something in an email earlier today that it's hard to find a journalist who is also a motorcyclist. And as an editor of a magazine, I can attest to that. You can find journalists who are really good at journalism, and you can find motorcyclists who are really good at motorcycling. But finding anybody who is even moderately good at both is very challenging. It's a very small, narrow pool of people who can ride a motorcycle and intelligently communicate that to the masses. Anybody have any opinions on that? Have you experienced that as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've had employees, staffers who came on, and really when I'm hiring for a purpose. And I mean, you don't, and even to work at American Iron Magazine, you don't have to know everything there is about every motorcycle ever made. It's great if you show an interest. It's great if you had some power sports knowledge before or what have you. And again, I have some people who are more concentrated on the nuts and bolts of the words. Some people who are more concentrated on the nuts and bolts of getting the pictures right and getting the pictures perfect. And then, of course, there's me and my copy editors who need to make sure that the motorcycling subject topic is straightforward, worthy and correct. Just plain old, it's got to be right before it can be sent out, to the public, whether it be online or in print. So yeah, people have their specialties, but to find somebody that had the entire package, it is difficult to find that person, and it's tough to find that person. Luckily, in the digital world, we don't all have to be in the same room or in the same building anymore. So you can have remote people contributing and things of that nature. So, but back in the old days when I started, I mean, we all had to come to the office. We all had to be there. So to find somebody in your region was a challenge that had these talents. So luckily now in the digital age, it's a little more flexible.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely been easier to find people remote, especially contributors. Contributors like Elisa is all over the world all the time. I never know where I'm going to find her when I pick up the phone. I'm like, oh, you're in Argentina, that's cool. Or you're in Italy, that's cool. It's always someplace. And it sounds like fun, and it looks like fun when you look at the pictures. But traveling internationally is not only time consuming, but it's draining. It's very especially when you're on a deadline and you're trying to get something to press, and and the words have to be clear, and as editors, not all writers write to this, like I said earlier, they don't always write to the style of your magazine. Maybe they're writing from multiple different outlets, and so they don't always change their tone. And you have to spend some time making sure that the words are clear and concise and target the proper audience. And I think people don't realize how much work goes into, like I said, planning and organizing and meeting those deadlines, especially when you're on a month to month, which a lot of magazines are not. It's a lot easier when you're doing a quarterly than when you're doing a monthly, because you've got a lot more time to finish that up.
13 issues a year, one every 4 weeks.
Right? I know, it's crazy.
Do the math.
Yeah, I trust me, I know. It's hard. And I was thankful that I didn't have to deal with advertisers, because that's just one more thing that you got to stir into the pot. It was like all we had to do was make content and put it out. So that was pretty cool. There are a couple more questions from the readers here before we run out of time. What's everybody riding now? And I guess I'll start since I'm talking. I have 2 bikes in my stable that I just never upgraded because I was getting free bikes every month for the last 4 years. So why would I buy a new bike? So I have a 2003 Suzuki SV1000, which I just fixed up this spring because I hadn't ridden it in 2 years. And it was sitting in my garage, and it wasn't running, and I needed to do some work on it. So I got that all fixed up, and so that's working now. And I have a XR250, 1994 XR250L Dual Sport with a flat tire, and I just haven't gotten around to wedging that tire off and putting a new tube in it yet. So yeah, I'm old school. I don't have anything modern. And I almost bought this thing. This is the Super Bloom that Julia was talking about. I almost bought this thing from BMW last year because it was so much darn fun riding this thing. Not on the freeway. It sucks on the freeway, but boy, I tell you what, you get off the freeway and it's a whole bunch of fun. But I was like, you know what? I don't really want to drop 20 grand on a motorcycle. My bikes are fine. I live in Wisconsin now, and I can only ride for like 2 days out of the year because it's frozen the rest of the time. So, my bike just sits in the garage with the battery tender most of the time, and it spends more quality time with the bike than I do. So what are you guys riding? Anyone?
Go ahead, Julia.
I have a Triumph Street Triple R on loan right now, and a Kawasaki KLX 230. And yeah, I mean, my owned bikes, I've got a first gen Ducati Monster. I was one of those hardcore brand people. I was all about Ducati until I discovered all the other bikes. Now I love a lot of everything. So yeah, I've got a first gen Ducati Monster and half of a 2016 Triumph Street Twin that I'm still in the process of putting back together after my crash in October. So yeah, so I bounce around.
I'm going to go next because Steve is much more interesting than his garage will be much more interesting than mine. I have a 2016 BMW 800 GSA, the one that I rode in my big event, the Sisters Ride. I have a Suzuki DR 350, like that's like a 1998 or something, out in New Mexico. I believe in spreading my bikes around. And I have a R1200 GS that was my East Coast bike because my mom lived here, but now I live here, and so that one's going to be for sale because I'm getting an Indian this summer on loan.
Steve, what are you riding?
This summer, I'm fortunate that I can alternate between brands and between bikes every couple of years. I am bound and determined to get my TDM Yamaha TDM F850 registered and insured so that I can be riding that. But there's a variety of projects in the garage, including the 66 Triumph Bonneville that I picked up and took it to a few bike shows in patina condition and won awards. So I can't wait to get it running and put some fresh tires on it and ride it to some bike shows when the bike shows start back up. So that's a goal. The Yamaha, got a couple of Harleys going. The one that's running and insured and registered is the Sportster with a 1200 engine in it. And this year we're going to be spending some time on an Indian Challenge.
Fun. So there's one more question from a reader. Len says, CNET reported Harley plans to save itself by selling fewer bikes. Does anybody know if that's true or if that's a smart move, and if Harley's still going to be around in 2030? And are they still popular with those riders under 40 as they are with those over 40? There's a bunch of questions in here, but I'm going to start with the last time I read Harley's balance sheet, I think they had $1 billion in their cash reserves. So yeah, they got a few more years, even if they don't make a ton of money in the next couple, they got a few more years before they run out of cash. Harley's a 5-part business, in my opinion. I mean, they've got motorcycles, they've got parts and accessories, they've got financing, they've got merchandising, and then they've got apparel. So if you break that down into 5 separate businesses and you move that all around the world, which is what they're trying to do now, they can still make money. It's just a matter of, are they making it selling Harleys? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Maybe Steve can add a little bit more info on that, or maybe Billy or Elisa knows some more about the background on that too.
Your first sentence was they're selling what kind of bikes?
Selling fewer bikes. So they're planning to sell
fewer bikes.
Harley's planning to sell
well, as I mentioned earlier, they do have competition now where they didn't in the past. So yeah, they've come to a realization that okay, well, get nimble, and then that's where the Softail came from. All those different Softail models, something for everybody in that Softail line that they have. What are they? 11 different models in that Softail line. So making something for everybody will be what they need to do to get some cash for everybody to stay afloat. So yeah, they won't be making one bike. They won't be making one style of bike. And it's why they won't be making one bike for America. They won't be selling bikes just in America. And no secret that they've gone to other shores. There's other people in other parts of the world that ride a lot of motorcycles. I'd venture to say a lot more people than in the United States ride motorcycles in other countries. So it only makes sense to go there and sell them something that they can use. So will they be around in 2030? Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. But as far as actual numbers, well, yeah, I mean they've had great competition come up from the European and Japanese markets. But again, now here in the United States, there is another home team to root for. So yeah, I mean, they did have to suffer, a little in some of the numbers there.
Yeah, I think everybody thinks Harley's going to stick around for a while, and I think we are running out of time, so we're going to call our hosts back in and say thank you for everybody joining us today and see what comes next in this day of fun.
Well, we're all in for a big treat because the next session is our Rev Match Single Riders Mixer. So for all of you who are
All right, I'm out of here.
Right. Bye.
We are going to take a 10-minute break. So join us for that. Invite all your friends. This next one is free. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for participating. What a great conversation. If your questions didn't get answered, for all of you who are in the audience watching, we do have the ability to follow up with you via email afterwards. So keep an eye out in your inbox. Our panelists can follow up with you individually and answer more of your questions. We didn't even get to the question about how you get hired as a writer. So perhaps we'll have to talk about that next time. But hey, David, thank you so much for leading the discussion, for keeping everyone on topic. And for everyone, thank you so much for your contributions. We all might not be here without you because you helped drive interest in this sport for such a long time, and we love you for it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all you do for the sport.
Oh, thank you.
All right. See y'all in 10
Thank you
minutes.
guys for doing this.
Yay.
Of
Yeah.
course. Woo. All right.
Woo.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
See you soon.
Bye.
Rubber side down, be safe.